Sir, sir, please proceed, sir.
Just a minute. Live streaming on. Okay, now, madam, start. Unmute yourself, madam.
A very good morning to one and all. I am Dr. Banjusha Ingavle, Organizing Secretary of a webinar. It gives me immense pleasure to extend to you a very warm welcome on behalf of Janta Shikshan Sanstha's Kisanveer Mahavidyalay Y, who has claimed all of us for the national webinar on gender and environmental history. This webinar is organized by Department of History, Women Empowerment Cell, and Internal Quality Assurance Cell in collaboration with Shivaji University History Conference, Kolhapur. I feel extremely great and honored to welcome today's keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Mahua Sarkar, eminent environmental historian from Jadavpur University, Kolkata, West Bengal. Resource person, Dr. Manisha Rao, eminent Eco-Feminist, Mumbai University, Mumbai. Guest of honor and inaugurator, Dr. J.S. Chaudhary, Secretary of Janta Shikshan Sanstha's, Chairperson of this webinar, in charge Pracharya, Dr. R.R. Vaidya, Vice Principal of all faculties of our college. This program is being conducted on Zoom platform and it is also live streamed on the institutional YouTube channel. So I take opportunity to welcome all dignitaries, professors, researchers, and students. So once again, hearty welcome to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, may I now request Mr. Bhima Shankar Birazdar, coordinator of webinar, to welcome all our guests and introduce the theme of webinar to this august gathering. Dr. Bhima Shankar Birazdar.
Very good morning, everyone. I, Mr. Bhima Shankar Birazdar, Assistant Professor, Department of History and Webinar Coordinator. At the very outset, at the very beginning, I take this opportunity to welcome sincerely all the dignitaries, including Chief Inaugurator, Keynote Speaker, and Resource Person. Just Department of History, Head Department of History, Dr. Avnish Patil sir, Chief Inaugurator, Chief Guest has joined. I welcome on behalf of Janata Shikshan Sanstha's Kisanveer Mahavidyalay Y all the invited speakers, invited scholars in the sphere of environmental studies and history. In fact, this kind of a national webinar has been organized by Department of History, Women Empowerment Cell, and IQSC, Internal Quality Assurance Cell, in collaboration with Shivaji University History Conference, registered Kolhapur. At the very outset, once again, I here introducing the theme of the webinar. At the very beginning, once again, I would like to inform you that we have signed an MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between Shivaji University History Conference and Department of History Kisanveer Mahavidyalay Y for the purpose of academic and research activities. Today, we have decided to organize such kind of a webinar. I am introducing right now the theme of the webinar. What is the intention? What are the objectives behind organizing such kind of a innovative type of theme? Today, the human world is standing at a crucial juncture in its development. Never before the entire Earth's resources have been facing the threat of its depletion. Dear friends, delegates, research scholars, environment has been studied in a science discipline. However, its impact on societies, communities, invites to study, explore from humanitarian discipline, means environmental humanities as well. The crisis of the present environmental destruction and ecological imbalance is to be understood only from our perceptions of what happened in the past. To have a constant dialogue between the past and present in environmental studies, the study or exploration of environmental studies, environmental history has become very important in 21st century. It is the most updated critical expansion of agrarian, industrial, technological, and social histories. Recently, history writing itself has been developed with the help of databases, based materials from all possible sources. History is not only confined to the traditional genre, traditional discipline which has been studied so far in social science discipline. Now, the paradigms of research has been transcended from conventional to multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach, which has been highlighted, given more emphasis in the new national education policy. Environmental history has been nurtured and sustained with the help of informations from all branches of knowledge. Nevertheless, the subject belongs to the traditional branch of history. Nowadays, the environmental impact has been greatly visible on the women communities also. Due to a recent countrywide lockdown or during the COVID-19 pandemic, women have been affected greatly. The basic idea behind finalizing such kind of theme is ecofeminism or environmental feminism, which deals with the relationship between feminism and ecology. There is a connection between women and nature as both of them have confronted in the operation of the patriarchal society in general and the Western society in particular. Women have an indispensable relationship with the environment, especially in small scale societies, wherein they worship the trees and nurture them. For example, sacred groves, Devrai, local traditions, knowledge should be given priorities over technological knowledge or advancement, in which ecofeminism would be more effective. It is assumed that from the global historiographical perspective, Carlin Merchant of the American scholar, American historian, feminist, she has written extensively on the ecofeminist by propagating a ecofeminist theory. As far as developing country like India is concerned, there are a number of scholars who are really enriching this new branch of study within environmental history. Dear friends and delegates, we must mention here the name of international radical environmental activist Vandana Shiva. She has explored almost all sections, almost all genres in the environmental studies, environmental history. She coined a number of words like biopiracy, earth democracy. It has changed the conventional history writing, which has already challenged by the postmodernist historians. Bina Agarwal, renowned Indian ecofeminist, explored significant gender inequities in respect of accessing private property, such as agricultural land and other community forest resources, as opposition from traditional or conventional ecofeminist to feministic environmental discourse. It is noteworthy to mention in global environmental history that the Silent Spring pioneering work by Rachel Carlson, American marine biologist, to be considered as a Bible of the global environmental movements. While connected to ecofeminism, In modern times, well-known major environmental movements, for example, Green Belt movement, which is spearheaded by Kenyan eco-feminist leader Wangari Maathai. She is known as a Green Daughter. Recently, in leading Marathi newspapers like Lok Satta, they are publishing articles on Vasundharaicha Lekhi, means daughters of the earth. It challenges the conventional history writing, and whosoever interested on developmental studies, on environmental humanities, sociology for environment, ecological economics, green politics, means environmental politics, these kind of new themes have been inviting to the young, vibrant, and energetic scholars to undertake such need-based research in history as an applied branch of history rather than a conventional theme or rather than a conventional subject or discipline. In Maharashtra too, from national level, we heard the names of number of environmental scholars. As I mentioned, Bina Agarwal, Vandana Shiva, Kusum Karnik, Meda Patkar, Ulka Mahajan, Suniti Yasar, Archana Godbole. These women, means these leaders in environmental conservation movements, are really encouraging a new kind of leadership, that is environmental leadership or ecological leadership. The large number of women activists, consistent active participation in the various environmental struggles, environmental conservation movements, they have enriching this new branch, this new domain within the environmental history. Thus, an account of environmental debates and discourse in the 21st century will be incomplete without taking into consideration contribution and role and involvement of women from global to local levels. Dear friends, at the concluding part, I can say now, due to pandemic, work from home and work for home, this is a really challenging aspect before the working women. They are working very rigorously without taking a single break up to 15, 16 hours. Means in domestic environment also, we have to empower her socially, culturally, economically, then only we can celebrate the women empowerment in India. Then only it can be achievable. I explored what the idea behind organizing such kind of theme. Once again, I welcome all the dignitaries, invited speakers, keynote speakers, resource persons, chief guest, inaugurator, Dr. Avnish Patil sir, Mahua Sarkar madam, Manisha Rao madam, our Sanstha functioning secretary, Honorable Dr. Jaivan Chaudhary sir. We are really very proud of Jaivan Chaudhary sir, because Chaudhary sir is our alma mater, alumni of our students, professor, principal. Now he is functioning as secretary of our esteemed institute, Janata Shikshan Sanstha Y. I thank one and all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Birajda sir, for welcoming all distinguished personalities online present for the webinar and giving short introduction of the webinar. Thank you, Birajda sir. Now, it is the very moment to invite guest of honor, inaugurator of this function, Dr. J.S. Chaudhary sir, Secretary of Janata Shikshan Sanstha. Before these, I want to introduce Dr. J.S. Chaudhary sir in short. Today's inaugurator, Dr. J.S. Chaudhary, is the Secretary of our Janata Shikshan Sanstha Y. Dr. Chaudhary enjoys the rare privilege of being associated with our institution right from beginning. He had his undergraduate and postgraduate education in the erstwhile Arts and Commerce College of Y. He also received a degree in law. He joined as a lecturer in our college. Later, he became the head of the Department of Commerce and Management. He worked as a principal of our college for many years. After his retirement, he was closely associated with our institution as an active member of our alumni association. Now, he is secretary of our esteemed Janta Shikshan Sanstha Y. He has worked as a research guide. About 12 students have been awarded PhD under his valuable guidance, while 16 students get MPhil degree under his guidance. More than 12 books he has published. He has also been closely associated with Rotary International and contributed to Rotary in a different capacities. He has also big contribution in the Marathi Vishwakosh by writing more than 300 titles. Dear participants, we are very proud that such a versatile personality is with us. Therefore, I kindly request Dr. Chaudhary sir to inaugurate this function and give the inaugural address. Dr. J. Chaudhary sir.
Thank you. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes,
Audible,
sir.
sir.
Please proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Manjusha Ingole, madam, for introducing me very nicely. Well, friends, we are meeting today for National Webinar on Gender and Environmental History, organized by Department of History, Women Empowered Cell, and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of our Kishanvir Mahavidyalaya Y, in collaboration with Shivaji University conference. Today we have for this conference respected Dr. Mali, President of the Shivaji University History Conference, Dr. Patil, HOD of the Shivaji University, HOD of History Department of the Shivaji University Kolhapur, resource person Dr. Mahua Sarkar from Jadavpur University, our in-charge principal Dr. R.R. Vaidya, Dr. Manjusha Ingole, the convener of the webinar, Professor Birazdar, IQAC coordinator, Dr. Shivaji Kamble, and all the professors and students, researchers attending today's webinar. Well, friends, first and foremost, I must welcome all the dignitaries from various universities, as well as our own university, Shivaji University Kolhapur, for this national webinar. As we know that because of the COVID-19 and pandemic, we are forced to have such a online webinars, online things. But one of the positive things here is that positive thing of this COVID-19 is we are privileged to have so many dignitaries, so many professionals, so many professors, not only from Maharashtra, but outside Maharashtra also. Otherwise, it would have been highly impossible. For example, today we have Dr. Mahua Sarkar, represents from Jadavpur University, arranging her trip and requesting her to visit our college, and then arranging her speech and all that. I don't think would have been possible at a very short notice, and of course it may not have been convenient to her also to travel so much and this thing. So we should look to the positive things, and we have been able to organize so many conferences, international, national conferences, and we are privileged to listen to so many eminent speakers all over the world, even even nationally from Delhi and from other universities as well. So today, I congratulate the organizers for taking a very novel subject, because I never thought that this could be a subject for a webinar or this could be a subject for deliberations. But I congratulate our history department professor, head of the department, Professor Birazdar, and Dr. Ingole for, because this is an interdisciplinary theme, gender and environmental issues. This is a very different and very innovative field, and Sir has already spoken about the role of women in protection of environment and so many initiatives in the um, sphere of environment. At the outset, I would like to welcome all the dignitaries from our own university and um, the universities outside Maharashtra. On behalf of our Janta Shikshan Sanstha, President Sri Madan Dada Bhosle, Vice President Sri Shankarrao Gadve, and all the office bearers of the Janta Shikshan Sanstha, as well as our professors and students of our Kishanvir Mahavidyalaya Vice. I also congratulate the our history conference President Dr. Mali for giving this opportunity to our college for jointly organizing today's webinar on a national level. Well, friends, as Professor Birazdar already spoke on global environmental issues, and many ladies, many women coming forward in India and also prominently in Maharashtra in protecting the environment and taking care of the environmental issues. The relationship between women and nature is not new. Throughout the history of humanity, symbolism is very present within the ideas that bring female gender close to nature. We must acknowledge the ways in which women have contributed and are contributing to interact with the nature and solving the natural and environmental issues. Women have undertaken management and support of natural resources that constitute everyday life of the community, villages, and cities. Their role is no more restricted to family life, but in public sphere also they are performing and they are contributing a lot. There are several local, national, and international initiatives in managing natural resources, and specifically all these initiatives are undertaken by the women leaders and women working in the field of environmental issues. In many environmental related conferences, they assume a leading role and advocate the need of conserving natural resources and environment. But friends, still, there is a lack of gender equity. This is a general observation. Still, as compared to men, there are only a handful of women actively involved as far as the environmental issues are concerned. So I feel that there is a lack of gender equity as far as natural and environmental problems and issues are concerned. I wish they would be empowered more in environmental issues and protection, and such a type of webinars will necessarily contribute, the deliberations in the webinar would help our researchers, our students, our lady professors, and our lady staff, and mainly our lady students, that they can also play a very prominent role as far as the protection of environment and solving the environmental problems. So with these words, I declare today's webinar inaugurated, and wish the webinar and all the deliberations all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for inaugurating the webinar, as well as for such a nice and well-studied speech. We are truly blessed with your presence. Thank you, sir. Now, I request Sri Birazdar, sir, to give introduction of today's keynote speaker, Honorable Professor Dr. Mahua Sarkar.
Dear friends, honorable guests, dignitaries, on this virtual assembly, I am here to introduce today's keynote speaker, dynamic and senior eminent environmental historian, gender historian, Professor Dr. Mahua Sarkar. Professor Dr. Mahua Sarkar is working as a professor in the Department of History, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, West Bengal. She has 33 years of teaching experience, from junior research fellow to dean and professor in the Department of History. She is now functioning on shouldering number of responsibilities in the academic and research areas. As far as research areas concerned, he is guiding number of research scholars, Dean Faculty Council of Arts, Jadavpur University, Coordinator, University Grant Commission, DSA 1, SAP, Department of History, Jadavpur University. As far as research areas, research credit of Sarkar ma'am is concerned, she has excellent publication records in her credit. If I read her entire profile, her curriculum vitae, it will really exhaust me. So I'm just summarizing her major contributions in the domain of academic research and co-curricular activities. As far as publications of books are concerned, there are 9 leading publications. As far as our theme of this webinar is concerned, 3 edited volumes, especially Women in History, The Indian Vistas of Environment as a co-author, Environment and History, Recent Dialogues. These are her major and leading publications. As far as the articles concerned, she has published more than 27 articles in leading national, international, reputed peer-reviewed journals. She has published more than 100 research papers, research articles in national and international conferences, seminars, symposia. She has undertaken 17 projects. It's really inspiring to young researchers, young students, young teachers of history. 17 projects she has completed, in which few of them funded by Wellcome Trust, United Kingdom, England, and Indian National Science Academy, New Delhi. As I mentioned earlier, under her guidance, total 16 students have been awarded PhD degree. Similarly, 30 students have been awarded with MPhil degree under her able and visionary supervisionship. She organized different kinds of orientation refresher courses in history and social sciences. She visited Poland, Switzerland, UK, especially in London, Norwich, and Sussex, Tokyo, where the Olympic Games began recently, Malaysia, Bangladesh, United States of America, means at New York. As far as her academic credentials, awards, and rewards are concerned, she has been conferred with number of awards and rewards. I must mention here, she has been awarded Shiksha Ratna Puraskar by India International Friendship Society in the year 2007. With this brief introduction, I may conclude that the resource speaker means keynote speaker has an authority to throw fresh lights, to explore new themes, new dimensions, new perspectives, new areas, new frontiers in the domain of environmental and ecological history, and not only confined to historical discipline, but as an environmental humanities and environmental science. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I kindly invite keynote speaker, Honorable Professor Dr. Mahua Sarkar, eminent environmental historian and professor, Department of History, Jadavpur University, Calcutta, West Bengal, to express her views on the topic recent trends in environmental history. Madam, please.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, respected participants and organizers of this wonderful national seminar. First, I will obviously mention Dr. Mandisha Ingola. Maybe I am not very particular about the titles and names, but please excuse me for that. Respected speakers like Dr. Jayawant Chowdhury, the person in charge of this entire Janta Sanstha, Dr. R.R. Vaidya, Dr. Mali, Dr. Shivaji, Dr. Patil, and my co-speaker, Dr. Manisha Rao, and please excuse me for missing a few. And last but not the least, my colleague, Professor Bhim Shankar Vijaskar, who contacted me. I'm really obliged, I'm grateful to all of you for giving me this honor of sharing some of the views which I'm trying to communicate with all of you. Professor Chowdhury is perhaps correct in mentioning that it is a plus point, it is a positive side of the unfortunate COVID situation that we can interact, and we're interacting more. We are participating more in such online seminars, and I'm indeed grateful to listen to the inaugural part of the seminar. Now, without going into further details of expressing my gratitude, without expressing also my embarrassment of introducing by Dr. Vijaskar in such a giant way, let me start with pinpointing my topics. Since I'm not presenting any PPT, I would request you to kindly listen, and if you want to interact generally, there is no question session after a keynote, but I will also prefer to have it to enrich myself. I will I have given the name as recent trends of environmental history as per the request made by the person who met me first, who suggested me to speak on environmental history. Though I am very glad to know that the title of the seminar itself is Gender and Environmental History. Now, before going into the recent trends of recent global trends and the Indian trends, which I have to obviously sum up to listen to others, I will obviously start with a reference to two important books, which are very important in this perspective. One is published in 1994 by Caroline Adams. The name of the book is Neither Man Nor Beast, Feminism and the Defense of Animals. So feminism and the defense of animals, and the second one I would mention from a quotation of Rosemary Radford Whither, who had written a famous book published from New York, Cedar Press, New Women, New Earth, Sexist Ideologies and Human Liberation. So what does she write? I will start my seminar with reference to that. She writes like this: women must see that there can be no liberation for them and no solution to the ecological crisis within a society whose fundamental model of relationships continue to be one of domination. What does she suggest for women? They must unite the demands of the women's movements with those of the ecological movement to envision a radical reshaping of the basic socio-economic relations and the underlying values of this society. Yes, my friends, I do feel that the values, particularly values of environmental history and the recent trends like environmental humanities as well as ecofeminism are very relevant to understand the problems of the modern world. As I've mentioned, that feminism has been related with, better kind of attitude towards animals. I will next mention, the work of Richard Charles Leontine, who passed away just in the beginning of this month, 4th July 2021. He is an evolutionary biologist and mathematician who has written a very good essay on organism and environment, where he explores the bipolar or twofold relationships existing between nature and living beings. And obviously, he is writing against the Darwinian biological thought of a built-in environment, and he is experimenting with the relevance of a niche construction, where women is a very important part. A niche construction, which means that living things actually determine environment. All living things determine the environment. And obviously, this man, who is a member of the group Science for the People, who is always speaking in favor of a democratic and inclusive science, is speaking of the ideas of domination and exploitation. And he is in tune with the epidemicians like Rob Wallace, who relates the increase in infectious diseases like SARS, MERS, and COVID-19 with, I agree with him, with the artificial expansion of agriculture and with the profit-making motives of multinational companies. So we have to understand that as a result of this expansion of development economies, there is an environmental crisis, and we have to understand that due to this growing environmental crisis of the earth, women are the worst sufferers because women are the marginal groups, women are the subalterns, and to understand how and why women are suffering, I have to, obviously, sum up first, as I've mentioned, the global trends, how did it emerge in history? And then I will once again conclude with reference to the theories of women, gender, and environmentalism, particularly with reference to ecofeminism, since my next speaker will be speaking in detail about that. I would mention that environmental thoughts are are very much interacting with historical methodologies. If I think it historically, it starts from the post-war decades of 1950s and 60s. And it has replaced the older role played by theologians, botanists, and medical officers. And obviously, now, when we are speaking of interlinking gender and environmental history, we have to understand that the area in which environmentalism germinated, obviously, in a postmodernist way, in a latest way, was the colonized periphery of the Afro-Asiatic countries instead of the European metropole. Varieties of local conditions, divergent regions, and geographical terrains from the periphery influence the formation of the historically anchored environmental thinking. So, why I'm starting my argument from with this idea that you may be a part of the code, the males may be a part of the code, but the periphery does influence. Women do influence, as we will see. The new paradigm of environmentalism, I'm not speaking on the basis of my earlier publications, since you have mentioned some of those earlier publications on environment. I'm only referring to my recent post research on environmentalism, on the idea of historical methodology and environmentalist thought, like this, that this was actually increasingly borrowed from history. And I'll mention Richard Bernstein, who had focused on human interaction with nature. By the first initial study of the Narmada Valley during 1920s. During the 1940s, we find several historians, like Trevelyan, I would mention, who were also working as, I refer to them as amateur environmentalists. The crux of their researches were focused on the historical agency and attributed to ecology, and especially they were the earliest historians to write about the imperial intervention in colonies that resulted in decline of human civilization. So I'm not speaking in detail about the primary intellectual causes, factors behind the intersection of historical methodology and environmental thinking. But let me just remind you that the rapid increase of researches on world history, I'm distancing it from European history. This emergence of world history has been influenced by political events like Second World War and decolonization. Obviously, these are important things to remember. And I would mention that from the mid-30s, we know about the French Annales School espoused by Fernand Braudel and Leroy Ladurie, and the British historical geography and local history dominated by Henry Clifford Derby, W.G. Hoskins, and I would once again refer to two eminent historians, Arnold Toynbee and Oswald Spengler, who had actually transcended, who had spoken more about, who had expanded the usual teleological frame of nation state as a destined culmination of historical trajectory, and turned to the idea of huge blocks of civilization. So Toynbee, I would just sum up, explain how two environmental elements, namely land and water, was shaped by human civilization. So the Annales School historians like Toynbee are worth mentioning, and obviously I would argue that gradually, the prevalent historiographical norm of empiricist positivist approach was critiqued by the schools I have mentioned. And Fernand Braudel, whom I mentioned, asserted the importance of geography, climate, the sea, material culture, and environment in his study on the Mediterranean region, as we know. And I would not go into the details of the Annales School, but I would only mention Emmanuel Leroy-Ladurie, who developed his own time frame, own idea of frame in very interesting book, which is also relevant for this kind of woman. You know, times of feast, times of famine. So I think that in both these times, women are essential. I'll go to that later on. Then I will say that from mid-1950 onwards, there was a steady participation of non-professional academics into the domain of environmental history. And here, the role of the Chicago School in the famous Chicago meeting had been encouraged by scholars like Carl Sawyer and Lewis Mumford. And obviously, apart from political and other kind of analytical models, there was a shift towards integrating climatic knowledge, which was found in the new intellectual circuit of the Californian school. And the year of 1963, Rachel Carson has already been mentioned. The year 1963 witnessed the publishing of Clifford Geertz's Agricultural Innovation, the processes of ecological change in Indonesia. You know, these are important additions to environmental history. I've already written in my book on Blacken's book, Places on the Rhodian Shore. And obviously, the overarching influence of Blacken and Chicago meeting was intimately tied with the new schools of environmental history born in countries like USA, Australia, Britain, and the colonies. A generation of scholars were coming out during the environmental movement of this period with large events, as has been mentioned by Bhim Shankar Birajgar, with the publication of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in 1962, Woman to Remember. The passage also we have to remember the passage of the Wilderness Act in 1964 by USA, and the first Earth Day, 1970. Then we can remember the works of George Perkin Nash and other historians. And obviously, the earliest scholars who were contributing to environmental history were chronicling the evolution of national attitudes towards the true beginning of the moment of a kind of the idea of desolateness. And obviously, George Perkin Nash was responsible for introducing the new course of environmental history in the formal history curriculum at a higher education level. I have mentioned that in Britain also we find that forest history and hydraulic water management history were becoming increasingly important by the works of Hoskins and Dudley Stamp. And I would also then harp on the increasingly globalized dynamics of climatic history, which was coming to notice during the decolonization period. And a range of producing worldwide international works and regional histories of climate change had given a novel thrust area to the academicians. One idea of this thrust area was that between 1250 to 900, actually, there was a little ice age discovered by quaternary climatologists, and this little ice age and its implications were noted seriously by Asianists and Africanists. Some of them began to see climatic connections with the severe impact of the so-called 17th century crisis on the tropical economies. So now, new data regarding sub-Saharan and Latin American regions and the Indian subcontinent were coming up. The field of environmental history intersected with the specific dynamic generated by the African locale and promised a reinvigoration of African history in the 1980s and recruited some of the leading figures among the environmental historians of the continent. I would not go into the details of that, but we have to come to the historiography of South Asia. Before going into that, I will only remember a book on the migrant cocoa farmers of southern Ghana, written by Polly Hill, a woman who was linking anthropology to detailed environmental history, thereby overturning through detailed fieldwork knowledge. She was one of the earliest environmental historians to depend on field knowledge. And obviously, I would mention Claudio Vita Finzi and the students of A.T. Grove, who had published the book, The Mediterranean Valleys, Geological Changes in Historical Times, a work based on North African experience. And obviously, there were two other major works on environmental history of the Mediterranean. The first was The Mountains of the Mediterranean World by John McNeill, and another McNeill, the elder one, who was a classicist of possessing interest in the Pacific region, established ecology as the most important factor of history in his work, Origins of Civilization and Plagues and People, written much earlier. Now about the historiography of South Asia. Environmental historiography of South Asia, and then I will come to gender. The historiography of South Asia has also increasingly incorporated environmental approaches into its agrarian history. So initially, the entire genre was to concentrate on agrarian history to have a history of South Asian economies. Obviously, I have written earlier also, this historiography was preferably the inheritance of the Indian Forestry Service and the struggles over property rights generated in the past 2 centuries by the imposition of English norms of legal practice. These were all leading to new genres of environmental history of South Asia. I would particularly mention the works of Winthrop, Stebbing, and officers like Dietrich Brandis. Once again, I'll refer to the Chicago meeting. The papers presented in the Chicago meeting were largely written by men and Anglo-Saxon men. But I mentioned a woman, Janaki Ammal, a professor of botany in Madras and co-author of the book, The Chromosome Atlas of Cultivated Plants. Janaki Ammal researched on the evolution of global plant distributions and human impacts upon them. Later, she wrote an essay on environmental history of subsistence agriculture in India. Paying attention to the difference between patriarchal, matriarchal, and tribal, by which she meant indigenous in the Indian agronomies, she pioneered both indigenous and gendered environmental approaches to land use history. Combined with his With her annal training, she had also contributed to environmental history in a new way. Then I will also obviously refer to the later annal historians like Phyllis Zoa, whose reference to the ecological histories of India, written in 1956, had thrown light upon the environmental history of the Kallar country of South India. A comparable shift towards an ecological questioning of conventional agrarian history developed among historians of South Asia in the early 1980s, and particularly in the writings of Richard Tucker and John Richards regarding the ecological changes accompanying economic transition in the 17th to 19th centuries. Also, there emerged a fresh batch of imperial science and history of environment from the 1980s. Roy MacLeod, Deepak Kumar, and Satpal Sangwa had in their early excursions gone into the necessity of criticizing Louis Penson's and George Basalla's portrayal of colonial science as the handmaiden of metropolitan science. This is related with the earlier studies on environment. John Mackenzie in The Empire of Nature and Richard Grove in Green Imperialism found new terrains to follow in the history of imperial conservationism. Some of them intersected histories of hunting and natural history collecting. Henry Hobhouse in Seeds of Change, 5 Plants That Transformed the World, written in 1985, and Alfred Crosby's book, Ecological Imperialism, in an expanded version, which was first published in 1972 as the Columbian Exchange, The Biological Consequences of 1492, was further focused on ecological imperialism, and this book focused on the effects of the introductions of crops and diseases by Europeans to the earlier colonies and the West Indies. Pre-European histories of plant transfer and disease in Old Order Africa, Asia, and Oceania, many accounts of which had been written by scholars such as Hurst and Shaw, as well as many contributors to the journal, famous journal, Economic Botany. We find they were writing about the colonial promotion of imperial botanic gardens and exchanges. Ray Desmond, using expertise gathered as an archivist of the India Office Library, published The European Discovery of the Indian Flora, a famous book, in 1992. And both he and Richard Drayton developed this theme in further closely related books on the history of gardening and impact of explorators like Joseph Hooker, and they were all critical of the global kind of colonial imperialism, and they were highlighting. I can also refer to Donald McCracken. So it can be said, I will go to the next point, that environmental thinking and historical methodologies were thus starting to form an interlinked nexus during the post-war period of 1950s and 1960s. This led to the diffusion of environmental thinking at the true global plane. It started gathering its raw material from the colonial, as I have already said, colonial and semi-colonial peripheral regions in the emerging world system. And due to the historical phenomena like world wars and decolonization, and due to the growing expansion of the new kind of imperial economy, we find that the course of environmentalism led to a massive methodological shift by touching the periphery. This trend inaugurated new cross-disciplinary interactions between professional academicians belonging to multiple disciplines of history, geology, botany, physiognomy, and ecology. At the end, we find that there were three important contours which are visible in global environmentalist thinking. One is the study of nature itself. From the ecological point of view, people started studying nature. Two is examining the facets of social customs. And finally, it involved analyzing the mental interactions with myths, homogeneous and universal divergence, and obviously this juncture of the uneven global time. So people started critiquing time, and an uneven global time is highlighted instead of a linear, homogeneous, and universal historical time of progress. The increasingly sophisticated theory of colonization and migration now took an environmental aspect, tracing the pathway of ideas and species around the globe. And this trend is increasingly bringing about the understanding of genders in environmental history. In all these cases, the importance of the North and South in grand narratives of development are highlighted. In all these recent writings, the two-way traffic between local and global shape the ramifications of environmental thought in diverse ways. Now, before going to ecofeminism in particular, before going to
Madam, you are not audible.
Unmute, please. Unmute yourself.
is it okay now?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
I have spoken in brief about the evolution of environmental history and the linking of environmentalist methodology with historical thinking from the earliest period till nowadays. I'm then referring to the philosophy of India, environmentalist thought in India, of which I told just now that though I'm rather skeptical about its application of this philosophy across genders, across elite and subalterns. I'm doubtful of the application of this philosophy across genders. But let me mention that the idea of active management of nature was always discarded in Eastern religions. That nature should be managed by itself. And I would also refer, I had already written on Hinduism, Buddhism, and Confucianism, and obviously in the ancient and medieval period, we do not have any detailed account, any clear-cut texts on environment, but the idea of preservation and compatibility with nature were always there. Forests in India were abodes of spiritual solace. And the Dharmashastras and Arthashastras expressed a deep ecological awareness and to play their role as lawmakers. As for the medieval period, we also find a serious concern for wilderness found in the state management of Mughal India. Obviously, the land-man ratio of medieval India shows that the crisis of nature did not appear at that time. But we have to remember that before the colonial times, the state did not tax horticulture or fisheries, as the revenue system left considerable space for pastoralists and forest dwellers. So a kind of a cosmos, a biocentric world. This theory was there in India in the pre-colonial times. But this theory, I wonder how much all these theories were applied. Anyway, I would refer to other important environmental historians of India, like Ramachandra Guha and Madhav Gadgil, who had challenged the central premises of the imperialist historians. And these scholars argued that colonial commercial exploitation had been responsible for degradation of the environment. And we know how Richard Grove had questioned Guha and Gadgil, but they had given their answers in terms of an ecological watershed in the colonial period. And we know about the works of other environmental historians like Ajay Skaria, R. Shivaramakrishnan, Mohesh Rangarajan, and Satpal Sarwa and others who were actually thinking in terms of hybrid histories of environment, who were actually thinking in terms of the different variables of environmental history. So, in short, in a lecture of say 40 or 45 minutes, I have, or say a bit more than 30 minutes, I have just summed up the linking of environmentalist thinking with global history, and I have also addressed the development of the theories of a balance of nature in the pre-colonial Indian text, and I have referred to the recent works of environmental historians, few environmental historians whom we know. Now I will come, last but not the least, for the last 15 minutes, I will speak about women and women's concern for environment. Last year only, I have written a small sum up in the journal Journal of the Asiatic Society on ecofeminism, where I refer to eco-feminist perception, which has assumed a significant place in the study of environmental issues. We know that the term ecofeminism was first used by Franco de Ubon in 1974. I can speak on other historians, other ecofeminists who have contributed to this theory, but I'm going straight to the arguments of the ecofeminist historians and writers, scholars who have been already mentioned. My earlier scholars did mention Vandana Shiva, who in her book, Staying Alive, Women, Ecology and Development, examines, compares and contrasts the organic or feminine and the scientific or masculine principles. So a discussion of the two have been very well initiated by Vandana Shiva. Ecofeminism is actually an umbrella term for research and activism that have linked Indian feminism with environmentalism. It draws attention to the interconnections between masculine bias in science and technology, the destruction of the environment, and the subordination of women. So, with the development of the idea of subalterns in history and sociology, with the development of the historiography of subaltern studies in the world in the 1970s, since 1970s, we find that women's concerns were highlighted in academia, and there was a linking between work and theory. Ecofeminism is actually, eco-feminists, all eco-feminists are remaining doubtful, skeptical of the key assumptions in ecological modernization. They are doubtful of science itself, the impact of science itself, since I have started with reference to a scientist who is speaking of the science of the people. Now I'm linking this theory of science with ecofeminism, which argued that the dominant forms of scientific knowledge and practice, which are embedded in the hegemony of instrumental rationality and reductionism, are actually conceived as the roots of contemporary environmental crisis. So it is not only the domination of the patriarchy, which I think my sociologist friend would speak in detail later. It was also against the patriarchal science that ecofeminists were arguing. The problems of environmental destruction and gender subordination are linked with the idea of rationality itself, instrumentality of rationality. And ecofeminists argue that these rational ideas are found in science and its applications. So the nature of the environmental crisis, according to the ecofeminists, is largely attributed to Enlightenment ideals and the pace of technological progress. So recently, a historian like Deepesh Chakraborty has argued that science has given us two things. One, as a boon, that is the idea of human development, and the other as a curse, that is the idea of human development. Then for which kind of humans? Which kind of humans? Who will be dominating in this idea of development? This kind of reductionist science, which has been introduced by scientific discoveries and the Enlightenment days, had already been criticized by many writers of the Romantic generation of Europe and the eco-theologists of the Christian world, who were comparing the Judeo-Christian world with Western Christian world, and they were constantly referring to this kind of a wrong kind of science, which has been further highlighted by the ecofeminists. So the nature of environmental crisis, therefore, according to the ecofeminists, can be attributed to Enlightenment ideas and the pace of technological progress. The relationship between human societies and the environment is therefore gendered. So this is the most recent kind of researches which are done under the umbrella term of ecofeminism, that all relations between human societies and all relations between societies and environments are gendered, as it is structured by patriarchal relations that have always positioned women closer to nature. However, the eco-feminist philosophy of science, of which I'm speaking, has stretched the argument further. The central norms underpinning science, like rationality, objectivity, and control, these are also celebrating masculine ideals only. So ecofeminism should be regarded as a part of a broader ecology movement, a broader ecology movement, which echoes the concerns of the critical theory that postulates a link between instrumental rationality and exploitation of the environment. It also draws on the radical feminist critique of patriarchy, arguing that the hierarchical ordering of reality associates the male or the masculine with mind and culture, and ahistorically makes the female only a feminine body closer to nature. This revolves around the woman-nature association. Women are associated only with nature, and the feminine, which in turn are devalued and degraded. However, the central eco-feminist position, which implies the twine oppression of nature and women, are accepted, and obviously this has been contested also within feminism itself. Already mention has been made of Vandana Shiva, and I would also mention that since there are many others to mention, but since Veena Agarwal has already been mentioned, I will refer to Veena Agarwal's critique of Vandana Shiva. And obviously, when Vandana Shiva speaks about the earlier lives, Veena Agarwal thinks that Vandana Shiva is perhaps exaggerating the traditional water experts, the traditional role of women. And obviously, other scholars say, if I refer to Rossi Braidotti or Eva Charkiewicz, they also find Shiva's argument regarding maldevelopment a persuasive one. Anyway, Veena Agarwal practically argues that ecofeminists do not challenge the traditional inequalities, which I have mentioned that I am skeptical about it. Anyway, instead of ecofeminism, Agarwal calls it feminist environmentalism. I would only argue that, since I have 5 minutes more, I would argue that Vandana Shiva had also responded to her critics. And in the book Ecofeminism, written by Vandana Shiva and Maria Mai, they have explained why women can overcome their diversity when it comes to the degradation of nature. The basic reason is that the impact of ecological destruction is harder on women than on men. Therefore, women are the first to protest against environmental destruction. Realizing that their lives are under threat, the survival instinct is more prominent in women than men. And this common concern, in spite of different variables within ecofeminism, this concern that women are the best responders to crisis connect all other women in solidarity. Whatever in the world women have protested, whatever the variables are, women have shared concern overriding their differences. This gives ecofeminism a sense of solidarity, which perceives differences as experiences, as enriching experiences, rather than as a boundary. So in spite of the different parameters, the idea of ecofeminism cannot be blamed with the charge of essentialism. And I would argue that the ecofeminist activists have given a new solve, and even a new taste to this theoretical idea. I would conclude, I will take 3 or 4 minutes more, that the ecofeminists of India, obviously, both activists and theorists from all disciplines, have given a particular special perspective to women's intuitive ethics of bearing, caring, and preserving. And the ecofeminists in India actually argued rightly that the social and patriarchal hierarchy that leads to the domination of male and oppression of women is directly linked with the social mindset which leads to the abuse of the environment. And the role of women vis-a-vis environment down the ages is actually very difficult to determine, as there is a serious lack of archival material. It is very difficult to get the voices of women themselves thinking loudly about their concern for nature. These thoughts are always relevant, and I'm happy that the seminar is organized on this issue. And we only celebrate the International Women's Day on March 8th, but I would obviously end my lecture with a sense of hope that in the Women's Day seminars and lectures, we find that it is increasingly becoming a hopeful global movement which celebrates the social, economic, cultural, and political achievements of women. The day also marks a call to action for accelerating women's equality. And the day also remembers, we also, through this seminar, we remember that today women play a critical role in managing all resources. Along with family and community levels, they are also referred to as the main strength of environmental entrepreneurship, which is also referred to as green ecofeminism. Scholars are writing articles on environmental entrepreneurship. In communities around the world, women manage water sources for fuel and food, as well as both forests and agricultural terrain. Worldwide, women and girls are up to 14 times more likely than men to die in a disaster. So I will end with reference to reference to an online debate ahead of the International Day for Disaster Reduction, where we find it was organized by Thomson Reuters Foundation, where it is argued that by environmental scientists, how women have become more resilient, more active to climate extremes. I will end with reference to a recent event only 1 year back in Latur, Aurangabad, where as many as 500 women from rural and urban areas, including school teachers and college professors, planted 5,000 saplings of 70 different species under the plantation drive for the preservation of the environment. This drive was organized by Mission Green Art, the Art of Living, an international association for human values at Nagzari village and Manjara River Rejuvenation Project. This event shows that women are becoming key to food, water, nutrition, and everything necessary to sustain their existence. Their role within the community is becoming indispensable, and they are the worst sufferers due to environmental crisis, worst sufferers due to the virus of the present day, and they can react to it in their best possible way. Therefore, it is now worthwhile to see what should governments, aid agencies, and businesses do differently to protect lives and put women and girls at the core of disaster risk reduction. So women can take a leading role to fight the ensuing environmental crisis. And this is the most important conclusive sentence which I can offer to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam, for your excellent, useful, and outstanding speech. You rightly pointed out that how these ecological crises arises, demands of women in ecological movement, values of environment in various branches, their application and role of women by taking example of Janki Ammal. As well as, madam, you have taken nicely brief account in a trends in environmental history up to the ecofeminism. Thank you, madam. Once again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Now, we will move to the next part of our webinar. We have with us eminent eco-feminist, Honorable Dr. Manisha Rao. May I now take opportunity to introduce Honorable Dr. Manisha Rao. Dr. Manisha Rao, Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, University of Mumbai. She completed her bachelor degree from University of Delhi, postgraduate degree from Pune University, again MPhil in Delhi University, and again PhD in Pune University. From her educational point of view, she qualified UGC NET in January 1996, while in 1999 she awarded UGC JRF. When we observed her teaching or work experiments, her experience is a very, very vast. She worked as executive officer, research assistant, and currently working as assistant professor in a department of sociology, University of Mumbai. She actively participated in the designing postgraduate level at SNDT Women University, as well as MA and MPhil at Mumbai University. Under her guidance, hello. Under her guidance, 4 students, these are enrolled for PhD, while 2 students, they are submitted their dissertation, while 5 students, they submitted dissertation for MPhil. She already completed 1 major and 1 minor project. When we observed her research work, we found that he published 1 book, about 12 articles. These are published in various reputed journals. He writes 2 book chapters, as well as he presented 4 papers at different conferences. She is expert in a different area. Her expert area is, or academic interest is, sociology of environment, gender studies, development and globalization studies, sociology and social movement, urban space, communals, agrarian system, and in such various areas, she delivered number of lectures, which includes keynote addresses, as well as she worked as a resource person. She gave the number of guest lecture on these various subjects, as well as she chair the plenary session also. She worked as a peer reviewer for national and international journals, as well as book manuscript, syllabus revision for the PhD course. Along with this, she also worked as a member of scrutiny committee for minor research grant, University of Mumbai. She is advisor on interview board of staff selection commission, recruitment and selection of middle level personally, as well as she for the offices of government of India. Means such a versatile personality is today with us. Therefore, I kindly invite Honorable Manisha Rao to give his lecture.
Thank you, Manjusha Ingavle, madam. At the outset, let me say my thanks and pay my respects to Professor Jayant Chaudhary, the guest of honor, Dr. Ramesh Vaidya, the in-charge principal, Professor Bhima Shankar Birajdar, for inviting me to Y, and of course, it's only virtually that I'm able to visit Y, but nakki me yenare kaditari Yla zarur. Atta, of course, the situation with the rains is terrible, and I'm hoping that all of you are safe in Kolhapur, in Y, and other regions of the Konkan. To also the IQAC coordinator, Professor Shivaji Kamble, and of course to Professor Mahua Sarkar. Thank you for that wonderful lecture, which was so extensive and gave such a wonderful range of the work that has been done globally on environmental history as well as in South Asia, and touching upon aspects of ecofeminism. Thank you. It was a pleasure listening to you. In fact, now I wonder what I will be able to add and say at this conference. But I just thought that, as Professor Birajdar had mentioned, that I could speak a bit on maybe the interconnections between environment and gender, and talk about ecofeminism. So when we talk about, and I thought I will then later show some links to YouTube videos that later on movements, on environmental movements in the global north and the south, and if possible, if time permits, and maybe I can also touch on my own work in Karnataka. So when one looks at the idea of environmental history, in the late 20th century, with the rising environmental problems in the public sphere, there was and also, the emergence of innovative methodologies in the natural sciences, there was a sort of rise in the fact that maybe we have to look at environmental issues in research. It was also the time when there was a development of ecology, and that became an area of research and led to the demand for new assessments of the relationship between nature and human history. And that actually led to the launch of environmental history as a sub theme of history as such. So what it argued was that nature is not merely a backdrop of human affairs, but actually it's an integral part that evolves and changes. Yeah, so increasingly the environment began to be sort of assert itself and demanded that it be looked at, yeah, not merely as a backdrop, but as an integral part that that is bringing about changes and that needs to be looked into. So environmental history was talking about change in the relations between societies and nature. It emphasizes the human role in changing environment or environmental constraints upon human behavior. So not only the fact that it is influencing or emphasizing the human role that has led to changes in the environment, but also how the environment also leads to certain constraints or leads to breaks in the way humans behave. So these were two ways in which one could look at or understand environmental history and the relations between the society and nature. As Professor Mahua Sarkar spoke, also touched upon the French Annales School, the environmental history, it was one of the ways in which to understand the effect of the environment or geography was the idea of the longue durée, yeah, building of a historical background which was marked by environmental conditions. So Fernand Braudel, Lucien Febvre, Marc Bloch, these were all French Annales School historians who emphasized the need to start looking at these, at geography, at the way in which the environment and society interacted. Yeah, so it required to understand the interlinkages of landscape change due to, for now, globalization or deforestation, state control, developments in infrastructure, and gendered impacts on local communities. So one of the important aspects of environmental history was the idea of using the longue durée, which would help us to get a better understanding of society-nature relations. In terms of, when we are looking at gender and environmental history, in recent years, there's been a lot of debate over gender and environment. The idea or the fact that women's role in the use and management of natural resources was highlighted. And studies showed, a number of studies showed the impact of environmental degradation as a gendered process. Vandana Shiva's landmark book on staying alive, and later on their work on Vandana Shiva and Maria Mies's book on ecofeminism, of course later Beena Agarwal's, but a number of other studies talked about women's role in the use and management of natural resources, and that was something that was being sort of highlighted. And it sort of reflected the fact that women were the ones who were the worst sufferers with the destruction of the environment. Yeah? And poor and marginal peoples, they were the ones who were most negatively affected by environmental degradation. In rural societies, it was women who were mainly responsible for providing fodder, fuel, water for households. They had to go long distances to fetch water, to fetch fuel wood. Many hours were spent in doing that and with the degradation of the environment, what was happening was the distance that they had to cover, the time that they had to spend in collecting fuel and fodder became lengthened because of the destruction of the environment, or the pollution in the water of the water. So they had to go for longer hours. They had to spend longer hours in that, and this lack of access to these resources sort of increased, as I said, both their time as well as the energy spent on it, and also led to their impoverishment. So if you look at these uh, gender and environmental linkages, what we see is that there was a lot of debate over questions like, what is women's relationship with the environment? Is it something that is distinct from that of men's? Yeah. So these sort of questions came up, and this resulted in a number of different perspectives. Yeah, but majority of the perspectives, they highlighted that women share a special relationship with the environment due to their interaction with it as users, as managers. Yeah, so they argue that women have a special relationship with the environment. And if we then look at the nature of ecofeminism, what is it that one means when we are talking about ecofeminism? When did it begin? What is it that it's talking about? So ecofeminism is a word, or is a term that was coined by the French writer Francois Dubois in 1974. And later it was developed further by Yenesta King in 1976. And it with the first Eco-Feminist conference organized in the US in the 1980, entitled Women and Life on Earth, it became a movement. And ecofeminism has predominantly Western roots, yeah, and it emerged out of the peace, the feminist, and the ecology movements in the 1970s and the early 80s. Peace in the sense it was that time when the Vietnam War was going on, and women came out in large numbers in the US talking about peace, asking for peace and stopping of the war there. The women's movement was was very active in the 70s and early 80s in the West, and of course the environmental movements that began at that time. So the ecofeminist movement uh, basically emerged out of coming together of these three strands of the peace, the feminist, and the ecology movements in the late 70s and 80s. Yeah? So when one looks at the features of ecofeminism, what does one see? The idea that first, that women and nature, they share a special relationship. Yeah. So hence, women have a very important stake in ending the domination of nature and conserving the environment. First, that women and nature share a special relationship. Secondly, that there are important connections that exist between the domination of women and exploitation of nature. These connections, they argue, ecofeminists argue, can be traced back ideologically to patriarchal thought that sees nature as inferior to culture. The connections are drawn between the oppression of women and destruction of nature. And this can be traced historically to the emergence of Western patriarchal science of the 17th century, according to which women are equated with nature and that is considered inferior, whereas men are equated with culture and that is considered superior. So this kind of hierarchy sort of developed with the emergence of Western patriarchal science. And hence, what we see is that both women and nature are subordinate, are considered inferior, and are dominated upon. And therefore, women have an important stake in ending the domination of nature as well as their own subordination. And so these were the sort of basic features of ecofeminism. Carolyn Merchant, she points out that this scientific worldview, yeah, in which of course one can see also the debates on scientific forestry being embedded. So the scientific worldview views living, animate nature as dead, as something that is inert, that one can manipulate, that one can exploit for profits. Yeah, so this scientific worldview looks at nature as dead, as inert, as something that can be exploited for profits. And capital markets, they seem to assume organic or attributes of growth. So the views of it views women and nature, wage labor as resources for the modern world system. Yeah, and this seems to have a devastating impact on the lives of people and nature. The feminist movements and environmental movements that emerged in the 70s and 80s, they stand for egalitarianism, non-hierarchical systems. Yeah, so they have come together and they work together to sort of develop a common perspective, a common theory, a common practice. Yeah, and the change needed through a reconceptualization of the kind of relations between women, men, and nature in non-hierarchical ways. So instead of the hierarchy that has come in with the introduction of patriarchal science in the 17th century onwards, and it's still reflected, what the feminist movement and the environmental movement stand for is egalitarianism and non-hierarchical systems. And therefore these argue for a reconceptualization of the relations between women and nature in non-hierarchical ways. But so ecofeminism was something that took took research as well as academia as well as the movements by storm. And there were a number of conferences, a number of research work that has been published, etc., across the world. But a number of critiques also came up of ecofeminism. The idea that ecofeminism is ethnocentric, it is essentialist, it is blind to class, caste, and ethnicity. The idea that it is ahistorical, doesn't take into consideration the history of the region and actually neglects the material sphere. It also sort of portrays historical exploitation and domination of nature and women as going hand in hand. Both are seen as victims of development. And it is also sort of argued that ecofeminism is very anecdotal, like story-like. It is considered to be self-evident, and no actually concrete evidence or strong argument is put forward. Yeah. So many a time it is argued that Women are, carrying headloads of wood, which is, dead wood. They never sort of are in the forefront of cutting trees. But the idea that probably dead wood is much lighter to carry is not something that is looked at. Or that women are are not into mining and are not into various other sort of so-called violent activities on the earth. Maybe it is reflective of the gender division of labor that is there. Yeah, so it relates women and nature to biology, which is characterized by essentialism and romanticism. For example, as I said, not cutting trees and mining, and hence women are considered to be more caring. However, it is argued that it probably reflects only the gender division of labor and the distribution of opportunity. It also locates the domination of women and nature in ideology, whereas and it neglects the interrelated material sources of domination based on economic advantage and political power. It seems to sort of not look into this. The image of women retains a kind of patriarchal stereotype of what men expect women to be. Yeah, so it freezes women as caring, as nurturing, and reinforces gender stereotypes. Hmm? And emphasizes the special relationship of women to nature, ignoring the fact that men too can develop an ethic of caring for nature. It ignores specific contexts of environmental practices. It also seems to overlook the fact that the concepts of nature, culture, gender are historically and socially constructed and vary across and within cultures and time periods. It also seems to present women as a kind of homogeneous category without taking into account class, caste, race, ethnicity. These intersections are seem to be overlooked within this concept of ecofeminism. The common notion is that women are the worst affected by environmental degradation, and hence they're drawn towards conservation activities. Yeah? However, examples of women being agents of environmental degradation than conservation because of pressures of gender, class relations, and poverty are not, are sort of swept under the carpet. It also romanticizes the question of women's agency and ignores the possibility of a gap between women's interests and the ability to take action. Women may still be victims of the larger processes of domination. Yeah, so it seems to sort of ignore the fact that women's interests and their abilities or the agency seem to be sort of overlooked. If you look at, so with all these critiques also came up the idea of an alternative or an alternative conceptualization by Beena Agarwal in 1992, where in the gender and environment debate, she suggests a need to contextualize women's and men's relationship within their material reality and in specific forms of their interaction with nature. The effects of environmental change on people and their responses to it are, she argued, is structured by class, by caste, by race-based division of labor, property, and power. So it's not all. It's not that all women experience the same kind of exploitation. So the term that she mentioned, or the term that she put forward, was feminist environmentalism, which links between women and environment, which is structured by gender, caste, class, race-based organization of production, reproduction, and distribution. And the link is rooted in ideology and material conditions rather than only in ideology and women's biology. So this kind of uncritical celebration of grassroots movements deflects attention from inequality and oppressiveness towards women in traditional communities, and seems to overemphasize on women. This overemphasis on women obscures the fact that women in more privileged communities can insulate themselves from toxic and other environmental hazards. So, NIMBY, or not in my backyard, by privileged communities may not lead to NIAMBY, that is, not in anybody's backyard, but displacement into poorer areas, which, if you see, the environmental justice movements have talked about, where they pointed out that toxic wastes that are produced are being dumped, or even garbage wastes are being dumped into lesser, or less where less privileged or racial communities live. So. If one looks at now coming to the environmental movements in the global north and the global south, what is common to both the north and south women's grassroots campaigns is the vulnerability to environmental problems, the lack of access to centers of decision making that cause them. Yeah, so whether it is in the north or the south, it is women who are probably do not have access to decision-making powers, yeah, to centers of decision-making powers. So this whole call to think globally, but to act locally, often overlooks the fact that women live locally, so have little choice but to think locally. Women are the ones who have to walk further to collect fuel, fodder, water, as we said earlier, as local resources are depleted, and they're responsible for all the care work, whether it is for the young or the old or the sick. They are the ones who have that responsibility. And the differences between, if one looks at the differences between environmental issues faced by women in the north and south, in the south, problems are around issues of access to clean water and other resources, also issues of poverty and health. As Wangari Maathai from Kenya, she pointed out that women in the south, they are struggling against visible problems like desertification, soil erosion, what have you. In the north, the problems are not always so immediate or visible. The problems lurk in the air and ground, and hence the sense of risk more diffuse. Um, as in Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, where I'll show some links for those. Also, the Lois Gibbs Love Canal campaign over toxic waste, or even if we look at the present COVID crisis, it's lurking invisible. One doesn't know how to tackle this whole thing. So women's involvement in environmental campaigns is a critique of development model, which is based on scientific knowledge, industrial technology, and the capitalist market economy. The campaigns around environment, women's rights, health and economic well-being come together in this. In fact, what I am trying to put forward is, if I can just talk a bit about my own experience researching the Apiko Chalwali in the Uttar Kannada district of Karnataka. One of the issues that I had tried to understand was what was women's involvement in the Apiko Chalwali, in the Apiko movement of Karnataka, that women did participate in these movements. However, so was it done because, using an eco-feminist perspective, was it because of their closeness to nature? Was it because they had a special relationship to nature? What was it? So what I realized was that women were very actively involved within the Apiko movement, but it was not because of a special relationship with nature or a special closeness with nature. Many a time they participated in the movement at the behest of their husbands or the male heads of the household. So it was not as though it was because of an innate sense of nature. So one of the things that I would like to sort of advocate is this idea of feminist political ecology, which sort of highlights the intersections of gender, race, caste, class that shapes environmental relations. It endorses the critiques of feminist environmentalism. It critiques the essentialist lens of feminist analysis of the environment, and looks at power relations which are inherent in people's access to and control of resources. It emphasizes the idea that women too can be creators, knowers, and producers of knowledge. And issues of social equity and social justice are emphasized. And the focus is on the imbalance of power relations. And so, what the feminist political ecology perspective sort of emphasizes on the power relations that exist. And it helps a gendered sort of analysis of knowledge production and the way power and politics influences the use, the access, and distribution of resources, and of grassroots environmental action. So, what I would like to sort of do in the last, in the last bit of this was I had told Professor Birajda that I'd probably show a few, clips of movements in the global north and the south, and I'm sure many of you have already may have seen it already. So do excuse me for that. But I'd like to share screen and let me see how I can, or if I could ask, yeah. Just a minute, if I could ask Professor Birajdar. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't know if you can see that. I hope you can see the. It's on
in
the
1892, William T. Love proposed connecting the upper and lower Niagara rivers by digging a 6-mile canal to provide cheap hydroelectric power to the area.
I think that link has opened in another way.
Oh, wait a minute.
This region, located in New York.
It's not showing?
Oh, no,
Yeah.
madam.
Just a minute, let me just see if I can do this.
State became
Can you
known
see
as
it
Love
now?
Canal. However, after only a mile of
Not
Is it-
still, madam.
No, no.
The PPT is, we are seeing only PPT.
Oh, okay. Let me just see how to.
Please have select another window where YouTube is open and then again share that window.
Acha, okay.
You have to
This
change
window is
shared
open in another window.
Ah,
Yeah,
this
that is-
shared window you have to change.
Just a minute. Just a minute. Let me stop sharing then.
Yeah, stop sharing.
Okay. I stop sharing.
Then select that window in sharing where YouTube is open.
Okay. I have to share screen anyway. Yeah, okay, now. Yeah. Is that
Okay.
Yeah.
it showing?
the
Yeah.
trench was dug,
Yes.
the project was
Yes,
abandoned due to a lack
Very
of
nice.
I'll just start it from
became known as electric power to
this was the
cheap hydroelectric in a 6
this
In
was the beginning.
1892, William T. Love proposed connecting the upper and lower Niagara rivers by digging a 6-mile canal to provide cheap hydroelectric power to the area. This region, located in New York State, became known as Love Canal. However, after only a mile of the trench was dug, the project was abandoned due to a lack of funding. The canal then became a landfill for chemical waste used by Hooker Chemical Corporation, the City of Niagara Falls, and the U.S. Army. Approximately 22,000 tons of at least 200 different chemicals were dumped by Hooker Chemical Company from 1942 to 1953. Then, In 1953, they sealed the landfill with a clay cap to contain the chemical waste and sold the land to the Niagara Falls Board of Education for $1. Despite Hooker's warnings of the potentially toxic nature of the property, the city proceeded to build an elementary school on the newly acquired land. In addition to the elementary school, hundreds of homes were built on the periphery of the former landfill site. This development of the land caused cracks to form in the clay barrier beneath. Soon after, residents began to complain of strange chemical odors, minor explosions, and black sludge seeping into their yards and basements. Children playing outside would return home with minor chemical burns on their feet and legs. These complaints began to surface in the early 1950s, but were not investigated until the late 1970s. Subsequent environmental sampling in basements next to the waste site detected over 200 different compounds. Of those, at least 12 are known to cause cancer. Additionally, high levels of dioxin, a chemical that the New York State Health Commissioner described as the most toxic substance ever synthesized by man, were found in the water. Many of these chemicals eventually migrated to nearby creeks, bioaccumulating in the tissues of plants and animals in the larger Niagara Falls area. Thus, the water contamination had negative repercussions on the entire ecosystem. With test results pouring in regarding the toxicity of the chemicals surrounding them, the residents of Love Canal became increasingly distressed. Lois Gibbs, the mother of a child at the local elementary school, began organizing the community and formed the Love Canal Homeowners Association in 1978 without any prior experience in activism. Her organization faced tremendous difficulty in getting the government to acknowledge that there was a problem, much less respond to it. Eventually, a very limited evacuation ensued, and a cleanup of the canal site began. The government only paid for the evacuation of pregnant women and children under the age of 2. Thousands of outraged residents still remained in danger. Then, in 1979, the EPA announced the result of blood tests that showed chromosome damage in over 30% of the residents of Love Canal, as opposed to only 1% in a typical population. Additionally, many children had birth defects. In 1 year, out of 22 pregnancies, only 4 babies were born normally. For example, one child was born with a cleft palate, deformed ears, impaired learning ability, deafness, and an extra row of teeth. By 1980, the residents had become so desperate that they took 2 federal officials hostage and demanded that the president take action. Amid a media frenzy and an upcoming presidential election, President Carter took note and a federal state of emergency was finally declared. A few months later, Congress authorized funding for the permanent relocation of all Love Canal residents. Finally, after years of collective effort and activism, the Love Canal residents seemed to be saved. Years after the fact, we can now see how the Love Canal disaster led to several positive developments in the United States. To help ensure that nothing like this happens again, many national legislative changes were enacted to help protect people and the environment. Love Canal also led to the creation of Superfund, a governmental program established to help clean up hazardous waste sites and hold companies accountable for their own environmental irresponsibility. More than just structural changes, the Love Canal disaster also significantly shaped how Americans view hazardous waste and environmental protection as a whole. It spawned a grassroots movement that gave Americans a voice on environmental issues and championed the powers of democracy.
So that was one presentation on the Love Canal, an environmental disaster that happened in the global north. When there's another one that I would like I'd like to show. Just a minute. This is. I'll have to again. How much time do we have, Birajda sir?
These days, there is a lot to balance.
Hello. Take your time, madam. No problem.
another short video on Wangari Maathai's The Green Belt movement.
For tomorrow, the environment is everyday issue. It's the air we breathe. It's the water we drink. It's the food we eat.
Is it visible?
And we can't live without these things.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
For me, the biggest challenge is governance, because the people at the top have power. Because they have power, they have control of resources. They have a lot of privileges, and they can continue to increase these privileges from where they sit. And the public at the grassroots can continue to suffer. I could see that the top is very heavy, and changing the top is very, very difficult. And changing the top, if you don't have the grassroots, is almost impossible. So what we did in the Green Belt movement was to go to those grassroots, those bottom, and instead of trickling down, go to them and say, maybe should be a trickle up. The entry point is the tree. A tree has a personality, and as it grows and it changes the landscape, it also seems to change the minds of the people, and it brings with it a certain rapport that actually encourages people to do more. So that you start with a few farmers, and before you know, so many other farmers want to also participate.
Ndeithagĩrĩria atumia kũ-form groups na kũmonia ũrĩa tree nursery ĩformagwo. Nĩtwĩkĩrĩte maratathi tĩri na tũkawota mbegũ icio tũgaciĩkĩra maĩ. At the same time tũrekĩra maratathi tĩri na kũmabanga kũrĩa tũkũ-transplant seedlings.
This area, before conservation, it was very much degraded. You can see now the seedlings that the trees that we have planted. In the whole of this area, we have planted about 1 million seedlings. Before we came in, people used to cut trees, even the small ones that were there. So with this kind of slope, the erosion was very severe. Now you can see the change. The area looks green. It is very green. Look at the river, it's clean because there's no erosion. So the community will have clean water.
I've always seen poverty as having two sides to it. Poverty will cause environmental degradation because, as I sometimes do, a poor person will cut their last tree to cook what may be their last meal. They're not worried about tomorrow. They're worried about today. On the other hand, it is very important for poor people to understand that the more you the more you degrade your environment, the more you mismanage your environment, the more you are likely to dig yourself deeper into poverty.
maĩ magatuĩka rĩu matingiuma na kũu thĩ, koguo karũĩ nĩ gatuĩkĩte nĩ gegũthira. No kuma rĩrĩa tuonire ũguo na tũkĩambĩrĩria kũhanda mĩtĩ mwaka wa 2000 nĩ tuonete improvement na mũno makĩria maĩ nĩ mambatĩrire na hinya mũno nginya atĩ ona nĩ kapindaga makĩria ma andũ 5,000 araũndi na hatirĩ rũĩ rũngĩ rũkoretwo rĩu rũgĩikara ta ũrĩa andũ maikarĩte.
Now, because we were dealing with the poor people, we also wanted to give them an income. But we were keen not to be seen as coming with a bowl of money to give, a bag of money to give away. So we said, you plant the tree. If you make it survive, we will give you a token of appreciation. And I emphasize that because you can't pay for all that work. We didn't have that kind of money. They can actually make enough money which they can invest. And we encourage them to invest in income generating activity.
Oh, sorry.
So because in many ways you're trying to improve the quality of life.
Ya kuhanda mĩtĩ henji-inĩ cia mũgũnda na ya graveria wambere mbegũ nĩ cionekaga na ihenya. Through this nĩtũthondekete mbeca cia mbaũ more than 100 he mũciĩ wakorwo ũtarĩ na strain ya operate nĩ magĩũcokete magoka makarehe ithomo ici ingĩ cia magatũhe kind of loan magatũ supply na mĩako nĩgetha twarĩkia kũiga tũkĩrĩ tũgacoka tũkendia ũngĩ rĩu income ĩyo yũkaga gĩkundi-inĩ. Mbũri ici nĩ ibreedĩtwo kuma Germany, koguo nĩ irĩ iria rĩingĩ na nĩ resistant na mĩrimũ tondũ koguo twa investire mbeca harĩ mbũri ĩrĩa twambĩrĩirie nayo na nĩ ĩhotete kũrehe mbeca nyingĩ mũno makĩria kuma 1996 rĩrĩa twaingĩrire group-inĩ ya mbũri. Out of mbeca iria twaheanĩte kahanda mĩtĩ twareherwo tũkĩgũra mbũri.
To work with the communities, you need passion. You need to really want to do that because otherwise they can be a nuisance and you can be in a hurry because you want them to change like yesterday. Quite often we get people who are educated, they have big ideas, but they want these people to change overnight. They can't. And if you push them too much, they will do it while you are there. And once you pull back, they collapse. So it's always good to hear that there is somebody somewhere, we are no longer in touch, and this person is still going on with their project. They are now able to stand on their own. They can truly say they have improved their quality of life. And it all started with planting that one tree.
Yeah, stop sharing. If I have a bit more time, I can show you a small thing on the Apico movement. Otherwise, we will. Manjusha, madam?
Yes, madam. Yes. Proceed.
Little more time? Okay.
Okay, proceed.
I'll just show you one little, because that is on my area, field area. Chipko movement, most of you would have seen it, so I'm not going into that.
India is a huge and varied country, a land of many extremes. And like most of the world these days, many of the forests and rivers that once covered this nation have long since been denuded. or destroyed. Within the ongoing march of humanity's suicidal battle against nature, however, India's people have regularly shown a rare, selfless desire to protect the natural environment. In 1975, something remarkable happened in northern India. The forests of the Himalayas were being cut down, which was nothing new, of course. But this time, local women, whose livelihood was dependent on these forests, hugged the trees to protect them from being felled. This spontaneous responsive action soon grew into a nationally successful movement.
So the lady who first hugged the tree, I asked him how this idea struck to you. He said, imagine if I am walking with my child in the forest and a bear or tiger comes. So I will put the child like this on my breast, so that even if the animal attacks, I shall be killed and the child will be saved. So this is a very simple thing. And he said that when the trees were marked for felling, then we thought that I should hug the tree and they will not kill the human being. And thus the idea spread everywhere.
All grassroots people's movements need spokespersons. Sunderlal Bahuguna became one such spokesperson. As a boy of 13, Sunderlal became a member of Gandhi's independence movement, eventually serving 5 months in prison for his staunch activism. Upon his release, he completed a university degree and began work as a journalist. When he married his wife Vimla, another veteran of the freedom movement, they returned to a small village in the Himalayas, where he worked with the other villagers as a labourer and also founded a school for the Dalit, or so-called untouchable castes. More than 20 years later, he became the spokesman for the first modern tree hugger. Based in the Himalayas, they became known as the Chipko movement. Chipko means to embrace.
I am simply the messenger of the movement. It was the ladies who hugged the tree. I simply went with this message from one village to another, saying people, they have done such and such things. So went to Delhi and met Mrs. Gandhi.
Under tremendous pressure. A home to numerous endemic species. They are among the most beautiful forests in India and are classified as one of the 18 biodiversity hotspots in the world. Over the years, this fragile ecosystem has come under tremendous pressure from encroachments such as logging, mining, and development activities like hydroelectric dams. In 1983, the state government of Karnataka was planning to clear fell a large section of forest around the small town of Sirsi. Their intention was to replace it with a monoculture teak plantation. Now, while monoculture teak plantations make for an arguably lucrative timber resource, There's very little that lives in them other than lizards and termites. Even the teak trees can have a hard time surviving. Some local residents were not too impressed.
These trees are not for CFA. Everything which we need comes out of the forest. We destroy the forest. Actually, we are applying our access to our culture. Without forest, we cannot live here. Without forest, I think there is no farming at all.
ಅದು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದು ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅದೇ ತೆರಕಿನಿದ್ರಿಂದ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಅದು ಉಳಿಸಿಕೊಳ್ಳುವಂತ ಭಾವನೆ ಬಂತು.
ಇವೆ ಶಾಕ್
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯೂತ್ ಮಂಡಳ ಅಂತದ್ದು ಒಂದು ಅವ್ರನ್ನೆಲ್ಲ ಕೂಡ್ಸಲ್ಲ. ಹಾಗಾದ್ರೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಊರವರೇ ಆದಂತದೆ ಇವರೆಲ್ಲ ನಾವೊಂದು ಸೇರಿ ಎಲ್ಲರೂ ಸೇರಿ ಒಂದು ಎಂಟೊಳೊಂದು ಕೂಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಒಂದು ವಿಚಾರ ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಅದು ಏನ್ ಮಾಡೋ ಏನ್ ಪ್ಲಾನ್ ಮಾಡೋದು ವಿಚಾರ ಮಾಡೋದು ಎಲ್ಲ ಒಂದು ಸೆಷನ್ ಇದೆ. ಫಾರೆಸ್ಟ್ ಏನು ಬಂತು ಅದ್ರ ಮಧ್ಯೆ ನಮ್ಮ ಗುಲೇಮಳಿಗೆ ಡಿಜಿ ಅಡ್ರ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಮ್ಗೊಂದು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಸಲಹೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟರು. ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಉತ್ತರ ಪ್ರದೇಶದಲ್ಲಿ ಒಬ್ರು ಸುಂದರ್ಲಾಲ್ ಬಹುಗುಣ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ಚಿಕ್ಕ ಚಳುವಳಿ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇತ್ತು. ಅವನ ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಬರ ಹಾಯ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದಿದೆ. ಒಂದು ಸಂದರ್ಭದಲ್ಲಿ ಪಾಂಡ್ರಂಗೇರ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕದು. ಬಹುಗುಣ ಬರ್ಲಿಕ್ಕೂ ಹೆಲ್ಪ್ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ.
Pandurang Hegde, a young local student, had been studying in New Delhi. And as part of his field work, he had visited Sundarlal's ashram, where he stayed for 3 months. Before he left, he was asked a question.
I asked him, what are you going to do after this? He said, service. Why did you come here? This is not the place to prepare servants. This is the place to prepare activists. So it stuck to him.
And that is the time Sundarlal Bhogunaji had come here. And we went together to this village.
ಬಹುಗುಣ ಹತ್ರ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಚಿಪ್ಪು ಯಾವ ರೀತಿ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಹ್ಯಾಂಗ್ ಮಾಡಿದೆ ಹೇಳುವಂತ ಅವರ ಸಲಹೆ ಸೂಚನೆಯನ್ನು ತಗೊಂಡೆ. ಅವ್ರು ಒಳ್ಳೆ ಸಲಹೆ ಕೊಟ್ಟು ಅದೇ ರೀತಿಯಾಗಿ ನಾವು ಒಪ್ಪಿಕೋ ಅಂತೇಳಿ ನಾವು ಇದು ಮಾಡ್ಕೊಂಡು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ.
The word apiko means to embrace.
And the people took the oath in the forest and they hugged the trees and they said, okay, we will protect the trees by embracing them.
So we hug the trees at the time. Oh, Marala, Kandavanu, Mandavana. What's the matter? Video like that. I will have to take one.
Over the next 7 years, the Apiko movement continued to spread their environmental message and challenge bad forestry practices. Beginning as a spontaneous grassroots movement, Apiko soon utilised the methods learned from Chipko and others.
We do a lot of padayatras, which means the foot marches.
The padayatra, or foot march, is a method of awareness raising and non-violent resistance that was pioneered by Gandhi in the 1930s. The British Apiko eventually changed both forestry policy and practice.
Chipko had already built up a goodwill all around in the country, among the forest officers, among the politicians, among the leaders. So that goodwill led to bringing a lot of pressure on the bureaucracy. And that is how, within a span of 7 years, we got to change the full forest policy in Karnataka.
Initially, the felling of natural forests to plant monoculture teak plantations was banned. But many concessions were...
So I've stopped sharing just to give you an idea of the kind of movements that have happened in the global north as well as in the global south, and in the area of Karnataka, which is closer to us now in near Maharashtra, and that's where I had done work. So just to point out that one needs to look at the material aspects, as Veena Agarwal had pointed out, to understand what is the relation of women to nature and also to probably take in the feminist political ecology perspective of paying attention to power relations. That is what the other thing that I wanted to sort of highlight. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, madam, for your enthusiastic and memorable speech. Madam, you have thrown a light on a linkage which is present in between feminist as well as environment. You also explain very well the woman role in exploitation of nature as well as ecological conservation. By hearing your lecture, one sentence of your speech, I realized, madam, and that is nothing but a woman are producer of knowledge. Thank you very much, madam. Once again, thank you. We all are enjoy your speech very much. Thank you, madam. Thank you. Now, the discussion session is started. If participants have any questions, queries, then they ask to the keynote speaker as well as resource person if you have any query. If no, then we will proceed further. Birajdar sir.
Okay, it is a request to all the participants that we have unmuted themselves. They can unmute themselves and they can ask the questions.
Okay. If any query or
Mr. Birajdar sir, please check the checkbox. I think no queries are there in the mind of the users.
Okay, okay. Now the time is coming that I take opportunity to invite chairperson of the webinar and in charge principal of the college, Dr. R.R. Vaidya sir, to give his presidential speech. But before his presidential speech, I want to introduce Dr. R.R. Vaidya, associate professor in the Department of Botany. He has been teaching experience in the Department of Botany as well as environmental science, and that teaching experience is about 35 years. He has played important role in beautifying our college campus. He has a keen interest in accepting all new challenges, and he is the one of the good techno-savvy person in our college. Therefore, he always enjoying all extracurricular work and participated in the major committees of our college. He has published a number of articles in a reputed journals. Also, he attended the number of national as well as international conference. In his guidance, in our college, we also organize the number of international conference also. Again, one of the important thing regarding to the Dr. Vaidya sir is he played a key role in Jai Kisan Boys Hostel for the students which are belonging to the families of the farmers who have committed suicides, and such a work which is done by Dr. R.R. Vaidya sir. So I kindly invite in charge principal, today's chairperson, Dr. R.R. Vaidya sir, to speech on his to give presidential speech. Dr. R.R. Vaidya sir.
Welcome to the dais for all the dignitaries. Our Janta Shikshan Samsthat Kishanvir Mahavidyalaya Y, Department of History and Women Empowerment Cell, along with Internal Quality Assurance Cell, in collaboration with Shivaji University History Conference, have organized a national webinar on gender and environmental history. On this occasion, I welcome the President of SUHC Kolhapur, Mali sir, then Avinash Patil sir, Chairman and Head BOS Chairman and Head Department of History, University of Kolhapur. Then our mentor, Dr. J.S. Chaudhary sir, who is Secretary Janta Shikshan Samstha Y. I welcome you all, the dignitaries, including keynote speaker, Professor Dr. Mahua Sarkar from West Bengal, and resource person Dr. Manisha Rao from University of Mumbai. Our faculty has taken keen interest and have planned to schedule a very innovative idea linking the gender with the environmental history. History, which was taught in the classes, in the schools or even the colleges, it was a traditional one. But nowadays, due to multidisciplinary approach to collect the information regarding the past, what has happened in the past, now this is a very good approach. The role of woman and the nature or the so-called environment is no doubt it is from ancient times, and the humanitarian perspective for the study of environmental history, they have set the landmarks by certain environmentalists or eco-feminist, we can say. I can quote one example here as the Rahibai Popor, who is a Maharashtrian woman. She is obviously called as the seed mother, and she has prepared a seed bank of the local varieties. Now we are facing much challenges due to the advancement in the agro business and the we can say the field of plant breeding, that new varieties they are coming up, and we are lacking some, we can say, the inherent characters which may not be there in the coming days to come. So we should preserve the local varieties which are very much familiar to the our region. So that work she has done. Vandana Shiva, the speakers, they have even given the examples. 2,000 rice varieties they have conserved, and nearly 34 seed banks they have been prepared across 13 states. So this is a great work they have done, even though they were not allowed to go with that initially, but somehow they have sustained. As far as the we can say the J.S. Chaudhary sir has revealed, the relation between the woman and the nature is not new, but we must acknowledge the interaction of the woman in supporting and conservation of the nature and natural resources. This is very true. Women have remained always at the head in conservation of the nature. Mahua Sarkar madam has also given a very good guidance regarding the feminism and the defense of animals, women's role in fostering the environmental issues and the crisis in this expanding world. There are many crises which we are facing. I can quote one example. What I was visiting the Calcutta University, and Dr. Panda was there, and he told me that some arsenic problems were there in the region where the people were forced to drink the water contaminated with arsenic. Now there are the reports again that some big tycoons countries, they are dropping out their waste products in some regions where they find it quite suitable. So lead or German or some plastic or maybe the components of the computers which are not degradable at all and can make the contamination in the water resources and even can interfere with the environment. So these we should consider as alarming state, or it should be a concern with the seriousness that we should not allow such type of things to go into the nature directly unless they are processed. The masculine dominance and the submission of the subordination of the feminine gender and the pace of the technological progress, this is again to be equated in a wise manner, and the ecofeminism should be considered and at the broader concern I can say here. the gender perspective can add to the conceptual framework by categorizing here as far as the Donald Worster's transformation on the earth is concerned, with a proactive approach to the field of environmental history, it is lacking the gender analysis. This conceptual level of ecology, production, and cognition are the significant framework for the research. The gender perspective can add to this conceptual framework in two important ways, that these three categories can further be illuminated through the gender analysis, and the environmental history needs a fourth analytical level, that of reproduction, which interact with these three earlier levels I have said. Women and men have historically had the different roles in production relative to the environment. In earlier days, the people, they were practicing for the shifting cultivation and all that. So the decisions over the environmental degradation that dictated when to move the camp and the villages sites lies in the hands of women. In historical communities, women are often the primary producers of the crop and fabricators of the hoe, planters, and digging sticks. In agrarian economy of colonial and frontier America, women's outdoor production, like men's, had immediate impact on the environment. Although traditional contributions of women to the farm economy continued in many rural areas, and some women assisted in farm as well as home management, by the progressive era, women have focused on maintaining the home for husband and children, led many women, such as those quoted above, to spearhead the nationwide conservation movement to save forest and water and to create national and local parks. Manisha Rao madam at the end has shown 3 clips. They are very innovative and eye-opening, I can say. One should think of the role of men and women in a precise way without dominating the woman. They are really the caretakers of the nature, I can say. The gender perspective on on environmental history therefore offers more balanced and complete picture of the past human interactions with the nature and advances in its theoretical framework. Yet within the various acts, I can say, if it is a scenario or a scene at the global ecodrama, it should be include the men's and women's role come to the center stage, in which the nature itself is the actress. In this way, gender in environmental history can contribute to more holistic history of various regions and eras. So I pay salute to all the ladies, all the feminine genders that have taken care of the nature in their own way and have set an example of the work they have done in the past and still they are doing in the form of, I can quote one example of Medha Patkar or the Rahibai, and many more are there, those who have contributed to the restoration of the nature as such. So I conclude my speech with these words. I thanks to the speakers who have very, in a firm way, I can say, in a very precise way, they have enlightened us and our students. On behalf of Janta Shikshan Samstha and Kisanveer Mahavidyalaya Y, I thank all the dignitaries, including our Secretary, Dr. Jayawant Rao Chaudhary, then here the Mahua Sarkar madam and Manisha Rao madam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You have been always inspiration for all of us. Without your support and inspiration, we could not have been organized such a successful webinar. Thank you, Vaidya sir. Thank you. Before we conclude the webinar, we have vote of thanks. May I now invite Dr. Shivaji Kamble, IKSC Coordinator, to propose vote of thanks. Dr. Shivaji Rao Kamble.
Okay, thank you, madam. May I audible?
Yes.
Honorable Chief Guest, respected keynote speaker, resource person, and all the participants. It's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. On behalf of Janata Shikshan Samstha Kishanvir Mahavidyalaya Y, Department of History, Women Empowerment Cell, and Internal Quality Assurance Cell, that is IQAC, I extend my sincere thanks to Honorable Pratap Rao Bhosle, alias Bhau, the trustee and previous president of Janata Shikshan Samstha Y, and the present president of Janata Shikshan Samstha Y, Honorable Madan Dada Bhosle, and all the directors for their constant support and motivation for the organization of such memorable events. I would like to extend my special thanks to Honorable Secretary Dr. Jayesh Chaudhary sir for his presence and delivering the inaugural speech. He is always supporting us to organize such events. We are really enlightened with your knowledge and presence, sir. I would like to extend my special thanks to Dr. Avinash Patil sir, the BOA chairman and head of the history department, Shivaji University, Kolhapur. Due to flood situation, he is unable to render his speech, but he has supported a lot for success of this national webinar. That I must mention a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation to the today's keynote speaker, Dr. Mahua Sarkar Madam, eminent environmental historian, professor in history, Department of History, Jadavpur University, Kolkata, who has spared his valuable time for us and highlighted on the environmental awareness in the participants. I would like to extend my special thanks to today's resource person, Dr. Manisha Rao, Madam, Assistant Professor in Sociology Department in Mumbai University, Mumbai, for accepting our invitation, and she had thrown a light on Eco-Feminism. Your lecture has really enlightened to all the participants, Madam. So both the presentations was really a knowledge feast for us. And so thank you once again, Dr. Manisha Rao, Madam, and Mahua Sarkar, Madam. I wish to express my gratitude to our in-charge principal, Dr. Ramesh Vaidya sir, for providing encouragement and all types of support. I also express my gratitude and thanks to Dr. E.B. Bhalerao sir for their constant support and keeping an eye on this webinar. I express my sincere thanks to Dr. B.S. Mali sir, Dr. S.V. Sakare, and all the members of Shivaji University History Conference Kolhapur for their constant support and guidance. Due to the flood situation, most of them are unable to present for this webinar. I express my special thanks to Mr. Birajdar sir, the convener of this national webinar, for organizing such a wonderful webinar. He is a very proactive person and handling so many activities. I also express my special thanks to Dr. Manjusha Ingole Madam, the anchorer and coordinator of this Women Empowerment Cell. Actually, she is one-man army. She is only one permanent lady teacher in our teaching staff, and she is always shouldering the responsibility of all the female students of our college. I also express my thanks to Dr. Agedkar sir, Vice Principal of Arts Faculty, and Mr. Karde sir, Vice Principal of Commerce Faculty, Dr. Sunil Sawant sir, Dr. R.V. Bakre sir, Wadiv sir, Tate sir, Lieutenant Samir Pawar, Mr. Anand Ghorpade sir, Organizing Committee members, technical supporting staff of our college, all the teaching and non-teaching staff of our college for unflinching support and coordination. I am very much thankful to all the participants and delegates, especially other college professors and students for active participation in this webinar. And at last, I express thanks to one and all who have directly and indirectly helped us for to make this national webinar successful. So thank you one and all. And now we will end up this webinar. But before ending this webinar, one announcement is there that this evening at 6:30 p.m. we have organized the webinar on psychiatric issues dealing with the COVID by Dr. Keshri Chandra, the psychiatric of Hindus Hospital, Mumbai. So I cordially invite you all this for this webinar. So thank you one and all. Thank you, madam. All to madam.
Thank you.
Okay. So thank you once and all. And now we will end the meeting. Okay. Vaidya sir.
Okay. Thanks to all the dignitaries. Thank you, Manisha ma'am. Thank you, Mahua ma'am. Thank you very much.
Just I'm ending the